The Heiress of Hartwell Green. Chapter 1. The Letter That Changed Everything. In the small back parlour of Mrs. Finch's millinery shop in Bath, where the air forever smelled of steamed ribbon and fresh straw, Miss Lydia Moore stood with her sleeves pinned to her elbow and a ledger open before her. She was not, by any definition that society would approve, a young lady of leisure. She was practical, self-educated, and accustomed to hearing the world decide what she was worth. "Lydia," Mrs. Finch called from the front, her voice brisk but affectionate. "A gentleman for you, or rather, his letter, which is worse, I think." Lydia wiped her fingertips on a scrap of cloth and went forward. The shop's bell gave a small, prim jingle as a messenger departed. On the counter lay a sealed envelope, thick, cream, and addressed in a hand that looked accustomed to being obeyed. Her name was written properly, Miss Lydia Moore. No Miss as an afterthought, no smudge, no careless abbreviation. She turned it over and saw the seal, a simple crest, an oak tree above a green hill, pressed into dark wax. Mrs. Finch leaned in, squinting. "That looks important." "It looks expensive," Lydia murmured. With a careful thumb, she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and inside the letter was a summons so improbable that for several heartbeats she simply stared at the words, waiting for them to rearrange into sense. "Madam, you are hereby requested to attend upon the offices of Mr. Pritchard and Son, solicitors, of Hartwell Green, Berkshire, at the earliest convenience, in relation to the late Mr. Edmund Hartwell and the disposition of his estate." The ink did not waver. The message did not soften. Mrs. Finch made a sound that was half gasp, half triumph. "Hartwell. Hartwell Green. Do you know it?" Lydia did, vaguely. She had heard of Hartwell Green in the way one hears of old estates, through the small talk of clients who took coaches into the countryside for summer visits, through the gossip of women who liked to speak of land as though it were a charming acquaintance. But she had never imagined it had anything to do with her. "I do not understand," Lydia said slowly. "Why would a solicitor in Berkshire write to me?" Mrs. Finch's eyes gleamed with the same dangerous hope she reserved for good fabrics and handsome prospects. "Because, my dear girl, they might be about to offer you something." Lydia folded the letter as neatly as if she could control the situation by controlling its creases. "Or they might be about to take something." At that, Mrs. Finch softened. She had taken Lydia in 3 years earlier, when Lydia arrived from the countryside with a single trunk, a stubborn chin, and no family willing to claim her. Lydia had learned to sew, to account, to listen, to smile politely when spoken down to, and to read every book she could borrow, because books did not ask where she came from. "You cannot ignore it," Mrs. Finch said. "I cannot afford to chase fantasies," Lydia replied. "Then chase facts. Go and hear them." 2 days later, Lydia sat in a hired post-chaise rolling through Berkshire lanes that grew greener by the mile. Winter had not yet loosened its grip, but the hedgerows showed the first shy buds of spring. The air smelled of damp earth and distant smoke. As Hartwell Green came into view, first the iron gate, then the long drive lined with bare-limbed trees, then the estate itself, settled into the landscape as if it had grown there, Lydia's breath caught. It was not grand in the way of palaces, but it was old, established, confident, and it was, according to the letter, somehow tangled with her name. She arrived not at the house, but at the village, where the solicitor's office sat between an apothecary and a modest inn. Mr. Pritchard was a careful man with a careful mouth. His son looked at Lydia with the curious caution reserved for unexpected guests. "Miss Moore," Mr. Pritchard said, rising, "thank you for coming. Please, sit." Lydia sat on the edge of a chair that looked too respectable to trust. Mr. Pritchard opened a file. "I regret to inform you that Mr. Edmund Hartwell passed away 3 weeks ago." Lydia felt a strange, distant chill. She did not know the man, yet death always carried weight. I offer my condolences, she said, because it was the proper thing. Thank you. Mr. Hartwell left no legitimate children. Mr. Pritchard paused, just long enough for the word to land like a stone. And he has in his will named you as his heir. For a moment, Lydia's mind refused the information. It was like being told the moon had decided to move closer to the earth. I beg your pardon, she managed. Mr. Pritchard slid a document across the desk. The estate of Hartwell Green, along with its lands and certain investments, are bequeathed to you, Miss Moore, on the condition that you take up residence at Hartwell House and accept the name Hartwell upon your marriage, should you marry. Lydia stared at the document. Her name looked foreign on such official paper. But how? She whispered. Why? Mr. Pritchard's gaze held sympathy, but also the firmness of a man accustomed to storms. There is a matter of family history, Miss Moore. Mr. Hartwell wished to remedy a wrong. A wrong, Lydia repeated, feeling suddenly very cold. Before Mr. Pritchard could answer, the office door opened without apology. A man entered who carried himself like someone who had spent his life walking into rooms that belonged to him. He was not old, perhaps 30, perhaps a little more, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed back and eyes the colour of winter rain. His coat was plain but excellent. His boots were too clean for someone who claimed no vanity. He looked first at Mr. Pritchard, then at Lydia, then back again, as if Lydia were an inconvenient detail that had appeared in the wrong place. Pritchard, he said, voice clipped. Tell me, it is not true. Mr. Pritchard's mouth tightened. Mr. Stephen Hartwell, good day. I was just explaining matters to Miss Moore. Stephen Hartwell's gaze pinned Lydia, measuring, assessing, sceptical. It was not the gaze of a man admiring a stranger. It was the gaze of a man evaluating a threat. You are Miss Moore, he said. I am, Lydia replied, lifting her chin. His eyes dropped to the document. And you are to inherit Hartwell Green. Mr. Pritchard interjected. It is Mr. Edmund Hartwell's will, properly executed. Stephen cut him off with a sharp lift of his hand. I do not question the ink. I question the person. Lydia's cheeks burned, yet beneath the burn was something steadier. A lifetime of being underestimated had taught her how to hold her ground. You may question anything you please, sir, she said evenly. But I assure you, I am as surprised as you are. His eyes narrowed, as if surprise were precisely what he did not believe. Fortune has a way of seeking those who know how to feign it. The insult was dressed in courtesy, but it was an insult nonetheless. Mr. Pritchard cleared his throat. Mr. Hartwell, Miss Moore's claim is not a matter of opinion. The will names her. Stephen's jaw flexed. Then the will is either the act of a madman or the triumph of a schemer. Lydia stood, slowly, carefully, so she did not appear flustered. If you have accused me of scheming, sir, then you have done so without evidence. He looked at her as if she were a riddle. Evidence will be found. Then find it, Lydia said. But you will not find it in me. Something flickered, brief, unwilling, across his face. Respect, perhaps, for her refusal to crumble, or irritation at her refusal to be easily dismissed. Mr. Pritchard rose. Miss Moore will be conveyed to Hartwell House this afternoon. Mr. Edmund's instructions were explicit. The estate must not sit leaderless. The tenants require stability. Stephen's gaze sharpened. Leaderless? Hartwell Green is not leaderless. I have managed the estate's affairs for 10 years. And yet, Mr. Pritchard said gently, you were not named its heir. Silence fell, heavy and tight. Stephen's eyes returned to Lydia. You intend to go to Hartwell House. I intend to do what is required, Lydia said. His expression was unreadable. Then you had better prepare yourself, Miss Moore. Hartwell Green is not kind to strangers. Lydia's heartbeat refused to slow. Neither am I. When she stepped out into the village street, the late afternoon air felt sharper. The inn sign creaked in the breeze. A few villagers watched with the quiet curiosity of people who sensed change coming. In the distance, Hartwell House sat on its green rise, steadfast and indifferent. Lydia had come seeking facts. She had found a fortune, and a man who would rather see her gone than see her settled. Chapter 2. A house that did not welcome her. Hartwell House, Lydia discovered within an hour of arriving, did not merely look old, it felt old. The floors creaked with history. The walls held portraits of stern-faced men and pale, elegant women who had never imagined a Miss Lydia Moore crossing their threshold. Mrs. Avery, the housekeeper, met her at the door with a set mouth and eyes that swept Lydia from bonnet to hem in one swift, judgmental pass. "We were not informed you would arrive today," she said. "Yes, you were," Lydia replied calmly. "Mr. Pritchard informed you. If the message did not reach you, that is unfortunate." Mrs. Avery blinked, clearly unused to being answered so directly by a young woman without rank. "You will find Hartwell House particular." "I am particular," Lydia said, and walked past her into the hall. A footman hurried to take her cloak, but his hands hesitated as if unsure whether she was mistress or intruder. Lydia handed it over without comment. She had learned long ago that confidence, whether earned or borrowed, was sometimes the only shield one possessed. The first evening passed in a blur of introductions and careful observation. Lydia's chamber was fine, too fine, its curtains heavy, its bed broad. She ran her fingers over the embroidered coverlet and felt a wave of something dangerously close to grief. Because this was not simply a change of circumstance, this was a test of identity. The next morning she met the steward, the cook, the stable master. She walked the kitchen gardens with muddy hems and practical boots. She visited the tenants' cottages with baskets and questions, listening more than she spoke. Some watched her with wary hope. Others watched with suspicion. And everywhere, like a shadow in her periphery, was Stephen Hartwell. He appeared in doorways, at the edge of the yard, in the distance across the fields. He did not greet her unless necessary. When he did speak, his words were precise, cool, and edged with challenge. On the third day, Lydia found him in the estate office, a long room with tall windows and a desk scattered with ledgers. He was bent over papers, sleeves rolled back, ink smudged faintly on his knuckles. If he had been merely proud, Lydia might have dismissed him easily. But there was something else in his concentration. An earnestness that made his pride feel less like vanity and more like duty. He looked up as she entered. "You are early." "It is my house," Lydia said. His eyes sharpened. "Is it?" "Yes," she replied, and reached for the nearest ledger. "These are the rents." He stepped forward as if to block her. "Those accounts are complex." "I can read numbers," Lydia said without looking up. He gave a short, humourless laugh. "Can you read tenants?" She met his gaze. "I can learn." His expression tightened. "And what else have you learned, Miss Moore? In Bath, in millinery shops, in whatever life you led before this?" The cruelty was subtle, but present, a reminder that she did not belong. Lydia closed the ledger. "I have learned that people who hold power often mistake it for proof of worth." His eyes flashed. "And I have learned that those who arrive suddenly with claims and papers often leave with other people's livelihoods in their pockets." Lydia's pulse jumped. "You think I intend to steal?" "I think," he said slowly, "that my uncle was capable of reckless decisions, and I think you may be, willingly or not, part of one." She drew a careful breath. "If you wish to be rid of me, Mr. Hartwell, you will need more than suspicion. He stared at her, as if weighing whether she truly believed her own words. Then he said quietly, "Do you know what Hartwell Green means to the tenants?" "It means home," Lydia said. "It means survival," he corrected. "Bad harvests, sickness, widows. The estate is not simply a pretty view, it is obligation." Lydia's voice softened, not with weakness but with sincerity. "Then we agree." That seemed to surprise him more than any argument. For a moment there was silence, only the faint scratch of a quill from somewhere beyond the room and the distant call of a rook outside. Stephen's gaze dropped briefly to her hands. Lydia's fingers bore faint calluses from work. They were not the hands of a woman raised to embroidery and idle pianoforte lessons. When he looked back up, something in his expression had shifted. Not warmth, not yet, but a faint crack in certainty. "You speak well," he said, as if he resented admitting it. "So do you," Lydia replied. And then, because she was practical, because she had learned that avoiding truth only gave it power, she asked, "Who was your uncle to you?" Stephen's jaw tightened. "A man who gave me work when my father's debts nearly ruined us. A man who raised me here, in everything but name. A man whose choices were rarely discussed." "Did he ever speak of me?" Lydia asked. Stephen's eyes hardened. "Never." Lydia nodded slowly. "Then we are both strangers to his intentions." Stephen's mouth thinned. "I will not allow Hartwell Green to be destroyed by sentiment." "Nor will I," Lydia said. And for the first time since her arrival, his gaze held hers without disdain, only wary curiosity. Later that week, the local gentry came calling. They arrived in carriages and polished boots, with smiles that were polite enough to hide knives. Lady Winthrop, the vicar's wife, asked Lydia how she liked the country, as if Lydia were a guest rather than mistress. Mr. Cresswell, a neighbouring squire, inquired whether Lydia intended to keep Hartwell House in proper hands, as if it were a question of furniture rather than law. And always, behind those questions, was the unspoken, "Who are you to sit where you sit?" At the end of that exhausting day, Lydia stood alone in the hall, staring up at the portrait of Edmund Hartwell, a grey-haired man with sharp eyes and a mouth that looked accustomed to secrets. "Why?" she whispered. Footsteps sounded behind her. Stephen stopped at her side, looking up at the same portrait. He always did enjoy leaving trouble behind. Lydia's voice was tight. "Do you truly believe I am a fraud?" Stephen's answer was not immediate. When it came, it was quieter than she expected. "I believe. I do not know what you are." Lydia swallowed. "Then know me." Stephen's gaze turned to her, steady and searching. "And if I do?" Lydia's heart stuttered at the strange intensity in his voice. "Then you will find I am not your enemy." For a breath, his expression softened into something almost tender. Then he stepped back, as if he had come too close to a fire. "We shall see," he said, and walked away. But Lydia watched him go, and realized with sudden, unwelcome clarity. She had not only inherited an estate, she had inherited a battle. And the most dangerous part of that battle was that she did not dislike her opponent. Chapter 3. Proof and Rumour. The rumour reached Hartwell Green like smoke, soft at first, then thick enough to sting. It began in the village inn, then it appeared in the mouths of visiting ladies. Then, one afternoon, Lydia heard it whispered by two maids who thought the pantry door concealed them. "She's not truly Hartwell," one said. "They say she's the late master's byblow," the other replied, delighted by scandal. "She's too bold for a lady, isn't she? Too sure." Lydia's hands curled around the edge of the table in the morning room. She did not confront them. She did not rage. She simply sat with the knowledge that in this world a woman could be ruined by a sentence spoken behind her back. That evening, Stephen arrived unannounced in the library. Lydia was at a desk by the window, sorting papers, tenant lists, repairs, expenses. The candlelight warmed the pages. The room smelled of leather bindings and old wood. Stephen stood by the door, as if he were still deciding whether to enter. "You are working late," he said. "The roof of the Westcott cottage needs repair," Lydia replied. "If it is not done before the rains, the children will sleep under leaks." Stephen's jaw tightened. "You have authorized the repair?" "Yes." He studied her, then crossed the room. "Do you know what the villagers say?" Lydia's pulse tightened, but she kept her gaze on the papers. "I have heard enough." Stephen's voice was low. "They say you are Edmund Hartwell's bastard." Lydia's breath caught. For one dangerous moment, she felt the old panic, the fear of being cast out, of being labelled. Then she raised her head. "Do you say it?" Stephen's expression flickered. Anger, frustration, something like shame that such words existed in his world. "I do not know what to say," he admitted. "That is the trouble." Lydia's voice was steady. "Then say what you can prove." Stephen's eyes held hers. "That is precisely what I intend." He reached into his coat and produced a small packet. "Mr. Pritchard gave me this. Letters. Old ones. From my uncle." Lydia stiffened. "Letters about me?" Stephen's gaze sharpened. "About a woman my uncle wronged. A woman who disappeared." Lydia's throat tightened. "What is her name?" Stephen hesitated, then unfolded one brittle sheet. "Mary Moore." Lydia felt the room tilt. "My mother," she whispered. Stephen's eyes widened just slightly. "You admit it?" Lydia's voice shook, but not with guilt, with memory. "I have never denied my mother's name. I only rarely speak it, because people ask questions they do not deserve answers to." Stephen stared at the letter as if it had grown teeth. "My uncle wrote to her. He promised—" He trailed off. Lydia rose slowly. "Promised what?" Stephen's voice was rough. "He promised to provide for her. He promised to right a mistake. And did he?" Lydia asked, sharp now. Stephen's gaze lifted to hers. "No." Lydia's chest burned. She remembered her mother's quiet sadness, the way she never spoke of Lydia's father, the way she worked until her hands cracked. She remembered being told to keep her head down, to be grateful for whatever scraps the world offered. "My mother died when I was 16, Lydia said, voice tight. "She died in a rented room that smelled of damp and sorrow. If Edmund Hartwell had promised her anything, he broke it." Stephen's face tightened, as if he felt the blow himself. "Then why name you heir now?" Lydia's eyes stung, but she refused tears. Perhaps he thought money could purchase forgiveness after death. Stephen's gaze dropped. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. "I did not know." "No," Lydia said, "you did not." Silence fell. The candle flame trembled in a small draught. Stephen looked up, his eyes suddenly uncertain. "If you are Mary Moore's daughter, then you are my uncle's." Lydia cut in, sharp as a blade. "Do not finish that sentence unless you are certain." Stephen froze. Lydia's voice softened, but the warning remained. "The world has made enough stories about me. Do not make another one in haste." Stephen swallowed. "You are right." He set the letters down. "We must find proof. For your sake, and for the estate's." Lydia folded her arms. "And for yours, because if I am truly Edmund Hartwell's kin, then your resentment will have been misplaced." Stephen's eyes flashed. My resentment is not personal. It is, Lydia said quietly. It is personal because you care. Stephen's mouth opened, then closed. His gaze held hers, intense, searching, as if he were seeing her anew. For the first time, Lydia realized something that unsettled her far more than rumors. Stephen Hartwell's skepticism was not only about the estate. It was about the fear of losing what he had built his life around, and perhaps it was about the fear of wanting someone he believed he should not. Over the next days, they worked together, reluctantly at first, then with growing rhythm. They visited the solicitor. They examined old parish records. They sent for a midwife who had delivered half the village 20 years ago. They questioned the vicar, who fussed and blushed and offered useless sympathy. And through it all, Lydia learned Stephen in the way one learns a landscape, slowly, with attention. He was careful with tenants. He remembered names. He spoke to children as if they mattered. When an old man's cartwheel broke, Stephen ordered the repair without being asked. When Mrs. Westcott's youngest fell ill, Stephen sent broth and an apothecary, quietly, without expecting praise. Pride, Lydia realized, was only the surface. Underneath was devotion. One afternoon, after hours of trudging through damp church archives, Lydia and Stephen returned to the house with mud on their hems and exhaustion in their bones. In the entry hall, Lydia paused, suddenly dizzy with fatigue. Stephen caught her elbow, not tightly, not proprietorially, but steady enough to keep her from stumbling. His hand was warm through her sleeve. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lydia looked up, surprised by the closeness. Stephen's eyes were fixed on her face, his expression torn, as if he were fighting a battle inside his own chest. You should rest, he said, voice low. And you should stop looking at me as if you are afraid, Lydia replied, before she could stop herself. Stephen's breath caught. Afraid? Yes. Lydia's voice was quiet now. Afraid that if I am proven, you must accept me, and afraid that if you accept me, you might... She stopped, because the rest of the sentence felt too dangerous to speak aloud. Stephen's grip loosened, but he did not release her at once. You do not understand what it means, he said, voice rough. This estate, this name, my life has been built around protecting it. And what if, Lydia whispered, protecting it means protecting me? Stephen stared at her, and for an instant, the proud mask cracked. Then footsteps sounded nearby, and the moment broke like glass. He stepped back. We will continue tomorrow, he said, too controlled. Lydia watched him retreat, her heart pounding. The proof they sought was important, but so was the truth neither of them dared to name. Chapter 4. Hartwell Green. Chosen. The proof came, as truths often did, from somewhere humble. It was the midwife, Mrs. Kettle, who arrived at Hartwell House with a basket of eggs and a face that had seen too much life to be impressed by gentility. She sat in the kitchen, accepted tea, and listened to Lydia's careful questions. Then she nodded once, sharp and certain. I remember Mary Moore, she said. Quiet girl, pretty in a plain way, worked too hard, carried herself like she'd been hurt and refused to show it. Lydia's throat tightened. Do you remember anything else? Mrs. Kettle looked at Stephen, then back to Lydia. She had a child, a girl, and before the child came, there was a man who visited once, late, when the lanes were dark. He wore a fine coat and a face like trouble. Stephen went still. Mrs. Kettle's voice was blunt. I did not see his name written anywhere, but I saw his seal on a letter he left behind, oak tree over a green hill. Lydia's breath caught. Stephen's jaw tightened as if he had been struck. Mrs. Kettle sipped her tea. Mary told me he promised her a better life. He promised her marriage, if I recall. but promises are cheap when a man has money. Stephen's voice came out hoarse. Did she name him? Mrs. Kettle's eyes narrowed. She did not need to. She only said, "He is a Hartwell." The room fell silent. Even the hearth seemed to hush. Mr. Pritchard, when presented with Mrs. Kettle's testimony, produced the final piece. A sealed affidavit Mary Moore had signed years ago, naming Edmund Hartwell as Lydia's father and detailing his promise of support. Edmund, it seemed, had kept it locked away until guilt, or age, forced his hand. The matter was clear. Lydia's claim was true, and with truth came new danger, because proof did not always bring acceptance, only new forms of cruelty. When the local gentry learned the truth, their polite smiles sharpened into righteous indignation. Lady Winthrop arrived in a storm of perfume and disapproval. "So it is true," she declared, as if Lydia had confessed to arson. "You are illegitimate." Lydia's spine stiffened. "I am human." Lady Winthrop's mouth tightened. "Hartwell Green has been—" "A place of work and obligation," Lydia interrupted, "not a museum for your approval." Lady Winthrop looked scandalized, as if Lydia had slapped her. "You will ruin the family name." Stephen's voice came from behind Lydia, steady as iron. "The name was bruised long before Miss Moore set foot here." Lady Winthrop turned to him, startled. "Mr. Hartwell, surely you cannot—" "I can," Stephen said. "And I do. My uncle's choices were his own. Miss Moore has done nothing but meet the consequences with dignity." Lady Winthrop's eyes narrowed. "And what of your position, sir? What of your claim?" Stephen's gaze did not waver. "My claim is to what I have earned, the right to stand on the side of justice." Lady Winthrop left in a fury. The house exhaled afterward, servants whispering, tenants watching, a sense of the world shifting. Lydia stood by the window in the drawing room, staring out at the green fields that now belonged to her by law, but not yet by love. Stephen came to stand beside her, not too close. "It will not be easy," he said quietly. "No," Lydia replied. "But easy is rarely worth having." Stephen turned his head slightly, studying her profile. "You could sell the estate, take the money, leave these people and these whispers behind." Lydia's gaze remained on the fields. "And become what they already assume I am? A woman who takes what she can and runs." Stephen's voice softened. "Then you truly mean to stay?" "I truly mean," Lydia said, turning to face him, "to be worthy of what I have been given, even if it was given badly." Stephen's eyes held hers. In them, she saw a struggle, pride wrestling with tenderness, duty wrestling with desire. "You have proven your claim," he said. Lydia's mouth tightened. "Have I proven anything else?" Stephen's breath caught, the question landing where she intended, in the space between them. He reached into his coat, drew out a small object, and placed it on the table beside them. It was a key, old, iron, heavy. "The key to the estate office," he said, "and to the tenant accounts, the lockbox, everything." Lydia stared at it. "You are giving that to me?" Stephen nodded once. "Because I have guarded Hartwell Green as if it were mine, but it was never mine to keep. Only mine to serve." Lydia's voice was quiet. "And what of your trust?" Stephen's gaze did not flinch. "It is yours as well." Her heart tightened, unexpectedly fierce. "And what of—" Lydia hesitated, because a woman could claim an estate more easily than she could claim a man's heart. Stephen's voice dropped, rough with sincerity. "Do not ask what I cannot yet speak." Lydia swallowed. "Then speak what you can." Stephen's jaw flexed. He looked at her as if the truth might undo him. Then he said very quietly, "I was determined to dislike you." Lydia's lips trembled, not with laughter, but with a strange, aching relief. "And did you succeed?" Stephen's gaze held hers. "No." The word was simple, but it carried the weight of every guarded look, every reluctant conversation, every moment they had stood too close and stepped back. Lydia's voice softened. "Then what will you do now?" Stephen's hand lifted, not to take hers, not yet, but to hover near it, as if asking permission even before he dared. "I will do what I should have done from the beginning," he said. "I will stop punishing you for my uncle's sins." Lydia's eyes stung. "And if the world punishes me instead?" Stephen's hand settled lightly over her knuckles, barely a touch, but enough to steady her. "Then the world will have to go through me." For a moment Lydia could not speak. She simply breathed, felt the warmth of his hand, and looked at the estate beyond the window, Hartwell Green, a place of duty and stubborn hope. "I am not what they wanted," Lydia whispered. Stephen's thumb shifted slightly, a quiet promise. "No," he agreed. "You are better." That night, Lydia walked through the hall alone, past the portraits, past the history that had tried to swallow her. She stopped before Edmund Hartwell's portrait once more. "I do not forgive you," she said softly, "but I will not let your mistake define me." Behind her, Stephen's footsteps approached. He stood beside her, looking up at the portrait with a steadier, sadder expression than before. "You should not have had to fight for this," he said. Lydia's gaze remained on the painted face. "Perhaps not. But I have fought." Stephen's voice was low. "And you have won." Lydia turned then, and in the dim hall light she saw him plainly, proud, yes, but also humbled, guarded, yes, but willing. She lifted her chin. "Do you still doubt me?" Stephen's eyes softened. "Not your claim." "And me?" Lydia asked quietly. Stephen's answer came after a long breath. "I doubt only one thing." "What?" "That I can be satisfied with merely serving at your side," he admitted, voice rough. "When I wish—" He stopped, as if the rest of the sentence might be too bold. Lydia's heart pounded. She reached out and placed her hand over his, not a grasp, not possession, but choice. "Then do not merely serve," she said. "Stand with me." Stephen's gaze locked on hers, intense enough to make the world feel suddenly smaller. "I cannot offer you ease," he said. "I do not require it," Lydia replied. "I cannot offer you a love that will be approved," he warned. Lydia's voice was steady. "Then offer me a love that is true." For a heartbeat, Stephen did not move. Then he bowed his head, not in submission, but in reverence, and pressed a brief, restrained kiss to her hand. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was a vow. When he lifted his head, his eyes were fierce with something like devotion. "Hartwell Green will be yours," he said quietly. "But if you will allow it, so will I." Lydia felt warmth rise behind her eyes, and she blinked it back, refusing tears even now. "I have been unwanted before," she said. "Do not offer yourself out of pity." Stephen's voice was steady. Not pity. Choice. Lydia nodded once, as if sealing an agreement. "Then choose me," she whispered. Stephen's hand tightened gently around hers. "Always." Outside the tall windows, the estate lay in moonlit quiet. The hedgerows held their buds. The land waited, patient as it had always been. Inside Hartwell House, a practical young woman who had once counted ribbons in a bath shop stood as mistress of an old estate, not because society approved, but because truth had made space for her. And beside her stood a man who had come to doubt her, only to discover that love was not the enemy of legacy. It was the means of saving it, the end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette